CE certificates out to all participants by early next week, and then also have the ISHA report sent off by next week as well too. So for those. So I'd like to go ahead and start this morning by introducing our first two speakers. We are going to start the day with Sarah Cheney, who is our Vice President of Government Colleges and Universities, and Dr. Rachel Sudduth, who is the current President of ISHA. Sarah Cheney is a speech language pathologist at Great Prairie AEA. She received her master's in speech language pathology from St. Ambrose University. And during her time at St. Ambrose, she served as the NISLA president and as an ISHA student representative. We're very fortunate to have Sarah serving as our Vice President of Government Colleges and Universities since 2019, and she is going to start us off this morning. I'll do a quick introduction of Dr. Rachel Sudduth, who will also be helping Sarah present this morning. Dr. Sudduth is the current president of ISHA. She has also previously served as the ISHA president-elect and as the vice president of government colleges and universities during her time on the ISHA board. Dr. Sudduth is an associate professor at St. Ambrose. She joined the Masters of Speech Language Pathology faculty in 2011, and she conducts research in the area of language-based learning disabilities, particularly impairment in reading and writing. She has worked as a speech language pathologist in many different settings, but is particularly interested in treatment for language impairment, problems in reading, writing, listening, and speaking in children and college-age students. Dr. Sudduth teaches research methods, advanced language disorders, and phonetics courses. So with that, I will turn things over to Sarah to get us started.
Good morning, everyone. Let me get my screen pulled up. Okay, so I want to welcome you guys to our Advocacy Day. Like Natalie said, unfortunately, we're not at the Capitol, but kind of the nice thing about advocacy is it can be done anywhere. You don't have to be in a certain location. We are excited to hold this event for you guys, especially the students, just to kind of teach you about the legislative process, teach you about how to advocate, how to reach out to those legislatures that you may have in your area. And we really want you to feel comfortable with it. I was a student at St. Ambrose 4 years ago, and so I was participating in this event at the Capitol, which that makes me feel older than I really want to be. I can't believe it's been 4 years. But it really helped me as a student just kind of know that my legislatures aren't like some huge intimidating people. They're just kind of everyday people. And I remember sending my first email to my senator and talking about a bill. And so that was kind of nice as a student. And I like to see that we're still doing this. Please feel free to send the chat or raise your hand for any questions. If I can't answer it, I'm sure Dr. Sudduth can. And we'll just try to answer it the best we can. Let's see. Then I will go over our agenda. So I'm going to start kind of reviewing the two bills that ISHA is monitoring closely. It's the Lead K bill and then the Interstate Compact bill. And then Dr. Sudduth will be reviewing the different levels of advocacy. And then our lobbyist, our ISHA lobbyist, she will be going over like advocacy basics. I know she has a great presentation planned to give lots of those nitty-gritty details about how everything happens. And so I'm excited to hear what she has to say. And then at the end, we will have a town hall with some current legislators. And it'll be kind of a question and answer session. And I'm sure they'll give us very good information. It is right now the end of the first funnel, so everything kind of has to be done by today. So it's a very hectic time up at the Capitol. You can only imagine what it would be like if we were there in person. So we really appreciate the legislators coming out and providing us with this time, as it is very busy. So to kind of start off, One of the bills that we are monitoring this year, and we have kind of monitored in previous years, is called the LEAD K bill. You can see it's started in the House, and it's related to language and literacy development for the deaf and hard of hearing children. This bill has been introduced and is worked on by the Deaf Coalition in Iowa during the past several legislative sessions. This year, it's kind of going to face the same challenge of, trying to get out of the first funnel. And then if it's considered by the Senate, it will face similar challenges. And, we're very prepared to work with the Senate leadership to address kind of our concerns. And our concerns really are that it promotes the acquisition of one language over another. And from what I can remember a couple years ago, is it was like saying, correct me if I'm wrong, someone, but it was like really trying to advocate just for like, okay, only sign language or American Sign Language. Well, not everyone in the deaf community uses that. And so that kind of makes us concerned. And then, the state committee that imposes additional costly and whoops, sorry about that. And prescriptive assessment and data collection requirements. So those are just some of our concerns. We're again monitoring it closely. We will see if it gets voted on out of the House. But again, I think that it's going to be somewhat of a challenge, especially because today is kind of that deadline. Let's see. So our big bill that we are prioritizing this year, we've kind of made it a priority for ISHA, is the Interstate Compact. So it's House File 500. And what this bill is, it's really cool. I'm very glad that this is being addressed in our legislation. Holy cow, sorry, legislation. And I think it's only going to help our field with audiologists and speech pathologists. So what it does is it allows us to practice face-to-face or through telehealth across state lines without having to become licensed in those other states that have passed the Interstate Compact. So right now, it's kind of a drawback of how different the licensure requirements are from state to state. And especially with telehealth being as big as it is right now, and I feel like it's going to continue to grow and be a big part of our professions. This is kind of nice to have. And so this is one of the things that will help. It also permits audiologists and speech pathologists to provide services to populations that are currently underserved or geographically isolated. Again, kind of with that increase of telehealth, this allows us, if you're in rural Iowa and say Missouri passes the Interstate Compact, you can also reach out to those clients that maybe are in rural Missouri and struggle to access the SLP when they really truly need it. This is also allows military personnel and spouses to more easily maintain their profession when relocating. So, if you're a spouse to someone in the military and you're moving to Iowa, especially like in the Quad Cities area with the arsenal, you don't have to get a whole new license and all that stuff. It kind of keeps it more uniform. Let's see some of my notes. This bill, so the Interstate Compact, other professions like nursing, psychology, physical therapy, emergency medical services, and medicine, they all have interstate compacts already. And so this was just kind of, it's our time to do it. Other people have it, other professions that are related to us, they have it. So it's nice that we'll be included. Let's see. One of the big things is that it needs 10 states to pass before it can become operational. So right now, this is a current map. The states in blue have already passed the bill and they are ready to go. And then all the states in red are the ones that are currently, you know, they have legislation that they're trying to pass. You know, here's us in Iowa, and it's passed the House. So right now, it is ready for the Senate to vote on. It passed the House 94-0, so no opposition from anyone in the House, which is exciting. And we hope that, you know, once it gets to the Senate, it'll pass with the same amount. And we don't really have opposition to it. That would be awesome. But we're ready to fight for it. You know, we're ready to face any challenges because, again, this will not only help us as professionals, but it also helps our clients and the people that we see and that we need to reach out to. Let's see, anything else? Again, I'm just really happy that this has been passed in the House and it's ready to go to the Senate. I think this is a really good bill, and you know, we've worked really hard. We got a grant from ISHA. Of course, this is a big push from ISHA. And so we were able to kind of hire a lobbyist, or our lobbyists. We were able to, you know, really get them to lobby on our behalf for this bill, and they've done an awesome job. We're very grateful to have our current lobbyist. I can't think of anything else, but does anyone have any questions about those bills? I'm trying to go through. If not, or if you come up with one later, just let us know. Again, previously we've had to face challenges with the legislation about, or legislators about licensing, I guess is the best term, kind of taking away some of our licensure requirements. And I'm glad we're not facing that this year. I think it would be kind of contradictory to us passing the Interstate Compact if we were trying to get rid of our licensing board. So that's one of the big challenges that we faced in the past. I remember actually the year that I went to my Capital Day, Advocacy Day as a student is one of the years that we were facing that challenge. And I wrote to my legislator, like, please don't take away our licensing board. I'm in my master's program and I really don't want to have to, you know, say this degree was worth nothing. I spent a lot of money. So we are important and we do need a good licensing board. So that's one of the big things that we have faced in the past, but hopefully we never have to face it again in the future, but who knows? None of us can really predict. But again, we will work, we as ISHA, as the board, we will work very hard with whatever we feel impacts our clients and us as professionals. And if there's no other questions right now about this, then I will pass it over to Rachel.
Jessica, I see that you have a question. What's your question? Oh, I think you're muted again.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I'm Jessica Dimick. I'm the owner of Hearing Doctors of Iowa. And I have been kind of also watching out on the side of hearing aid dispensing in regards to some movement of bills around telehealth. And one of the things that I wanted to ask about this, something that we observed in the way that things were written on the side of hearing aid dispensing in telehealth was it pertained to the language around the fact that when we're doing testing via telehealth and we're kind of going from state to state, one of the concerns was how the language was written in just very basic terms surrounding you know, how the appointments would go and maintaining the same standard of care. We actually found some gaps in how things were written where, for example, otoscopy was not required and calibration of equipment was not written in as a requirement. And that did kind of raise some concerns on the side of audiology pertaining to those of us that dispense hearing aids and how this might go forward. And I kind of wondered if there was a voice for that in regards to this, this bill.
The compact bill.
Yes.
Hearing aid dispensing is not a component of this particular bill in relationship to telehealth, if that makes sense. So this is really, I don't know if Stephanie or Kevin might have some better information as related to the audiology portion of this.
Well, I guess what I know of the licensure compact bill is it's speech language pathologists and audiologists. And in the state of Iowa, audiologists can't dispense hearing aids. We need our hearing aid dispensing license. So as far as the dispensing and the fitting of the hearing aids, that wouldn't necessarily be covered under this. You know, the hearing aid dispensing license would need to have this kind of a compact in addition to the speech language pathologist and audiologist license.
Sure. And so when it pertains to audiology and practicing via telehealth in the absence of hearing aid dispensing, what are we looking at? What kind of services provided by an audiologist then?
Really, so the only service that an audiologist isn't licensed to do is the actual fitting. Follow-up services are covered under our audiology license. Other, you know, diagnostic and consulting services are covered, but the actual fitting and dispensing is where the hearing aid dispensing license is required. So
sure. So like oral rehab would have a provision for this. Okay.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It does not change the scope of practice in our licensure for audiologists or speech language pathologists. Really, it just allows us to take the scope of practice we already have in Iowa and provide that in another state. And so everything is still true and accurate and the same as our licenses currently are. And since we have a separation of hearing aid dispensing, and many states do, which is why it's not part of the compact, is that it wouldn't pass in a state such as ours that have the two separate components.
Yeah, out of several states that I've worked in, I've had licensure in 5, and Iowa's the only one where I had both licenses. So it's a little bit different, a little bit confusing. So thanks for the clarification on that.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thank you for that question.
And one other thing just to mention, so our rehabilitation, but also likely potentially remote programming follow-up services. So if they relocate or snowbird to another state, then you could follow up with your patients that way.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin and Stephanie, for helping us answer that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I
Yes, Stephanie.
Can I say something about the Lead K bill too?
Absolutely, please. Stephanie is the Vice President of Audiology for ISHA, and Kevin is ISHA's current treasurer, who is also an audiologist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so while on the surface, the Lead K bill looks like it is advocating for children and development of language, what Sarah said is very important and very, very true, and I think most concerning to us as audiologists and speech language pathologists, in that it does seem to lean more toward the development of American Sign Language for all children who are deaf or hard of hearing. So certainly a child who is deaf, that might be more appropriate, but a child who has a mild or moderate hearing loss, they should be able to develop spoken language fairly easily with early intervention and appropriate amplification. And so that's that's the biggest concern, I guess, with the Lead K bill, and their requirement of an advisory board has a variety of professionals included. However, an audiologist is not included within that advisory board. And so that's an area where we also feel like it's important that an audiologist be included in that board, or in that group of people that are deciding on the evaluation process and intervention process for the children. And we definitely want parents to have a choice in what their child, what form of language their child would go with or learn. And that doesn't seem to be really a strong component of this bill as it is. So some of us are interested in talking with the people who have written this bill to see if there's a way to change the wording and make it maybe a broader scope bill. But I think part of the issue is, it's if there is another group of people that are required to be assessing these children, some of that is already in place, and there's a funding issue and a staffing issue that is already a challenge with some of the legislation with EDI, early hearing detection and intervention, that's already in place. So adding another group of people to do this assessment, it just adds more requirements for funding and staffing, and we're already kind of short in those areas. So several different factors surrounding this bill that we all agree that we want children to develop language and have successful communication abilities. It's just kind of the way to go about it, and working together throughout the state to be able to assess these kiddos and keep them on the right track is what's most important. So, yeah.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Mm-hmm.
Jessica, I see that your hand is up again. Do you have another question? Oh, nope. Okay. I wondered if it was. No problem. No problem. Well, now I want to talk just a little bit about advocacy. Sarah, thank you. So the first thing to think about with advocacy is really its main purpose is to educate, inform, and persuade. And today we're really talking about legislative advocacy specific to government. And what I want you to know as graduate students, as undergraduates, as professionals is, even if you're an undergraduate or a graduate student, you know more than our legislators do. They're not speech language pathologists and audiologists. And some of them may have had personal interaction with a speech language pathologist or audiologist. Maybe they have a loved one who has a communication impairment or a swallowing impairment. Maybe they have a loved one with a hearing loss. So some of them have met us and have some idea about what we do, but many of them have no idea. One of the reasons is that in general, when people access speech language pathology services, there is a disorder present, and people consider it that, right? There's an audiologist, there's like a disorder present. But if you're having physical therapy because you had surgery on your arm, that's not considered a disorder, right? That's just part of everyday life. I had surgery, so I'm going to go to physical therapy now. And so people have a better understanding of some of our allied healthcare fields because they're more likely to interact with them in their daily life, where they don't consider themselves having an impairment or a disability, even if it's temporary, even though that's the true definition of disability. And so they're less likely to come in contact with us. And Sarah mentioned that, over the last few years, that the state of Iowa has tried to decrease the number of professions who require licenses. And some of these are things for barbers, right? So that was a big move. Barbers and hairdressers and counselors and speech language pathologists and audiologists, not physical therapists, not occupational therapists, but really specifically our licenses. And so one of the things that's so important about advocacy is that people need to understand what we do, that we work with a wide variety of individuals, right? We're cradle to grave, right? We're everything in between, and we cover a huge area of impairments, and people don't know that. And so the better they understand our profession, the less likely they are to think things like, well, that doesn't seem important, we should just get rid of it. And so as students grow into professionals, remember that this education piece is going to continue to be relevant. It's not going to go away. It doesn't matter what state you live in. I remember working at a school, and the principal, frankly, had no idea what I did or why I did it, but she loved me, which was fine, right? Which was great. She's like, oh, I love just coming in. Oh, you're so good with the little ones. Yep, because I'm a speech language pathologist and this is what I do. But if you asked her what I was actually doing, she had no idea. She had no idea at all. And so that's one of those pieces, right? And so I held kind of continuing education for the professionals in my building, the teachers and the administrators, so they understood better what a speech language pathologist was and the kind of role that I could play in the school and in that school community. When we're thinking about legislative advocacy, well, what does that look like? Well, in Iowa, we do have local meetings with our legislators, and that's an opportunity just to go and you can just introduce yourself and say, hey, I'd like to tell you a little bit about speech language pathology, right? That it's really about developing a relationship. These really are regular, everyday people who have the luxury of being able to not do their job for 4 months and go live in Des Moines, right? I don't have that luxury. So I'm not going to be a legislator anytime soon. But there are people who do have that opportunity in their job. There are many people who have retired, who now are legislators as well. And so they're able to go to the Capitol and they're able to spend that time, that few months in the Capitol. Again, not every state is the same. Ours really is built around farming and farming communities. And so our legislative calendar matches that. It begins in January when not that there's not work on the farm, because there is certainly work on the farm, but where there is less work on the farm. And that time lasts, and our legislative session lasts until April. Hopefully they get all their business done, but if the business isn't finished, it may extend into those summer months. And then a lot of behind the scenes happen, but legislators aren't at the Capitol. That's not what their job is at that point. It's meeting with constituents, having conversations with people who elected them and put them in office, or who didn't elect them, yet they're still in office. And it's their job to meet with everyone. And so what's important for you to remember is that you really are an expert in some ways. And certainly you know more than them. And so have that confidence when you're talking to them, is they don't know what you do, so let them know what you do. And very few people reach out and contact their legislators. It's not very common. And so if you go out of your way to build a relationship with legislators, right, you're at every single conversation session, right? Not just to talk about this bill that you don't want them to pass, but having conversations about the things that you care about in your community, having conversations with them about who they are and why they decided to run for office and what their priorities are. Building that relationship will go a lot farther when there is something you're concerned about. You're able to actually say, hey, you know, I've been going to these coffee meetings one time a month for the last year. You know my name, please listen when I talk to you about this. And when we're thinking about advocacy in the legislature, we always talk about the legislature, but it's also that executive piece. Because though the legislature will pass the bills, the executive branch is who implements those bills, make sure they happen, allocate the personnel and funding, do the hiring. And so it really is a combination of both parts those two parts of government that we're thinking about advocating for. Sarah, if you will flip the slide. And then there's everyday advocacy. And I wanted to make sure to touch on this today. So yes, most of what you're going to hear about is this legislative advocacy. And that legislative advocacy is going to these town hall meetings and having conversations with legislators. It's writing letters, it's making phone calls, it's making sure people understand not just our profession, but the priorities of our profession. And I'll be honest that by talking about our clients, we're going to get a lot farther. Or we can talk about how important it is for me to have a license as a person because I want to keep my job. I want to make sure that I get paid fairly. I want to make sure that people recognize that what I do is important. But what is more important is the fact that I don't want someone who is not trained and does not have a license providing care for a loved one of mine. I don't want to have someone who does not have sufficient training doing a swallowing evaluation or providing treatment. And that's what's important, is we want to make sure that our clients, the people that we serve, are supported. And so when we're thinking about any kind of legislative activity, really our strongest argument is for the people we serve. Right? It's not our self-interest. Like, yeah, there are tons of reasons personally I want this. But when we're thinking about Lead K, we want parents to have the choice to choose what's best for their child. It's not my job to tell them what's best for them. My job is to give them options and help them pursue those options. And when we're thinking about the interstate compact, yes, it's important for me professionally so that I can more easily provide services to clients who don't have those services, right? I'm being hired to provide services. I want to be able to provide those services. I don't want to have to wait. I want to be able to provide those services to those I serve. So when we think about everyday advocacy, the first level is really self-advocacy. And these are very important in workplaces. And our profession is predominantly female. No surprises there, right? We all know this to be true. But part of that is there are a lot of cultural things that work against us being advocates for ourselves. You know, some of these things are pay, right? Is everyone making the same amount of money? And is that an appropriate amount of money for the services that we provide? We're going to think about things like benefits. We're also thinking about things like, is this a safe environment for me to work in? Is the stress so great that I can no longer provide appropriate, adequate services to my clients, right? Because self-advocacy isn't just about that salary, isn't just about those benefits to me. It's about, can I provide the best services to the clients I serve? And so by advocating for myself and making sure that workloads are balanced, that I don't have a 99% requirement for my productivity, right? When do I write those notes? How can I even write notes that are helpful to my client? What if my goals are all about conversation? How am I supposed to have a conversation while I'm typing constantly, keeping notes, right? Am I doing a disservice to my client? And is that ethical? Should I even be charging for a session where if all I'm doing is typing, am I helping them meet their goals? So all of that is self-advocacy. And when you think about advocacy, a lot of it is about the systems that we work and live in. So we're thinking about self-advocacy in the workplace. We're thinking about the system that I'm working in. And then how do I make sure that I have what I need to do what I need to do? When we're thinking about our families, sometimes this might be work-life balance, that there are absolutely workplaces that expect you to let everything burn so that you're doing what they want you to do. This is not a good place to work. This is a place you should consider leaving. But we have to think about that. And again, our family is part of this system, the system of our world and what we can do. When we're thinking about our community systems, every job that we have, if we're working at a hospital, if we're working at a long-term care facility, if we have a private practice, wherever we're at, where we're working is part of the larger community. And so as a speech language pathologist, I have to think about what is my role and how does my role fit into that community. Sometimes this might move to that area of legislative advocacy, but on a very micro level, right? When we're talking about school boards, when we're talking about county commissions, when we're talking about city councils, right? That's a place in our community where we have some level of legislative advocacy as well. It's also finding out more about what populations have the most need in the areas that we serve. We make a lot of assumptions about who has the most need that may not be accurate. And so it's finding out more about who our clients are and then what needs they might have in the larger community. And as a speech language pathologist, I can't solve every problem, right? But since I'm helping them build their communication skills, I'm hopefully helping them advocate for themselves so that in the community, they have an ability to speak up and speak out for what they need. But I still have to consider the systems that they're working in my treatment goals when I'm thinking about how can I best serve them. And then I talked a little bit about this idea of workplace, right? That all of these are about systems. And there's who we are as a person, and there's who we are as a speech language pathologist, as an audiologist. And we have to make decisions all the time about how those two interplay. And I know I always tell my students, if a job is terrible, it is okay for you to go, right? That I think sometimes we feel trapped, and sometimes the best advocacy is, maybe this isn't where I need to be right now, right? That we can try to change those systems and try to change those systems and try to change those systems. But I want to make sure that you guys continue to be speech language pathologists and audiologists. I want us as a profession to have the emotional energy to fight for our clients instead of having to fight an uphill battle for our own emotional health. And I know this is maybe different than what you planned on hearing today, but I want you to hear it, because advocacy is something that we have to build as part of our lifestyle. It's not just during the months of January to April, we're going to care about advocacy. It's something that as speech language pathologists, we really have a responsibility to do all of the time. As audiologists, we have a responsibility to do all of the time. It's not something we walk away from. It's something we really have to consider on a deeper level. And as we see things play out with ourselves and our family and our workplaces, we're going to see that those things do have an impact on the state advocacy level when we're talking about the legislation, when we're talking about on a national level for these things. And so this everyday advocacy is going to feed into what we care about on a state level, what we stand up for, what we say is not okay, what we say we want to support. And so for you as practicing professionals, as students who are moving into the profession, just keep in mind that everyday advocacy has a huge impact on what we do at all levels of speech language pathology and audiology and legislation and executive implementation in our state and nationally as community members. So any questions about that or other things? I do know that Kate, Kate, are you on the call now?
I am. Hold on one second. Hello.
Hello, Kate. So Kate Walton is one of our, oh, the word just fell out of my head.
Lobbyists?
Lobbyists, thank you. I was like, not advocate. That's not the right word. But yes, you are also an advocate for
I
our
also
profession.
do that.
That's exactly right. So Kate Walton is one of our lobbyists. And this year, ISHA did change lobbyist groups to better meet the needs of our organization moving forward. And Kate has previously worked on interstate compacts for other allied professions. And we are very excited to be working with her very closely this year and in the future. So welcome, Kate.
Thank you. I was trying to move around. There's like a bad light behind me. I look like I've got a halo, so sorry about that. I'm very pleased to be with you all today. I am, okay, never mind. Sorry, my dogs are doing something. I'm sorry about that. I am going to run through a brief presentation for you all on an Advocacy 101. And I do hope that you will stop me and ask questions or raise your hand in the chat. It's my intention to not use, jargon. We all have our professional, knowledge bases and jargon, and I will try to avoid that and really talk to you a little bit about what goes on your behalf at the Capitol, and how you can become involved, even in a year as unusual as the one that we're now entering year 2 of this. So I look forward to spending a little time with you, and then you'll see my business partner, Matt 80, will bringing the legislator for the legislative panel. So, okay, next slide, please. Thank you, Natalie. Okay, this is an overview of the presentation. I obviously will not be reading this to you, but just to pause here for a second so you can see what we're going to do during my time with you here today, along with a really pretty picture of the Capitol, probably my favorite building in the whole state. Next slide, please. So the first slide we have here is, I believe that you all have covered and had some conversation. I came in a little bit early around ISHA's key legislative priority this session, which is the Interstate Licensure Compact for Audiology and Speech Language Pathology. We were able to successfully move the bill through the House for state government. With the bill was introduced by the committee chair, Representative Bobby Kaufman, and then was assigned to Representative Joe Mitchell, who had attended a prior education session on the licensure compact and has been a real supporter. We had a few little bumps on this. I don't want to pretend that it was completely smooth sailing. There was some concerns raised by the Iowa Medical Society on a couple of pieces that we were able to resolve. I think they brought 7 or 8 issues to us, and we were able to resolve all but one of them, and they were willing to accept that as a compromise. So the bill passed subcommittee, full committee, and the House unanimously. You can see the numbers there, 93-0. It just means 7 people weren't there to vote in person. The bill has now been referred to Senate State Government Committee, and Senator Carrie Kelker, who you can see her nice picture there on the screen, is the committee chair. Matt and I talked to her Tuesday, and because I'll go over procedurally why, but they are not running any House bills this week, and so she will plan to have a meeting with us to go through the bill early next week, Monday or Tuesday, and schedule a subcommittee in the Senate at that time. But she was excited. The committee chair, Robbie Smith, was supportive, and so we feel that we're in good shape to continue to move this process. I see that Jessica has a hand raised. I can pause there.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
All right, perfect. I just had a question on if the Iowa Medical Society had anything against audiology, or was it speech pathology? I'm wondering what their issue was.
The concerns that were raised by the otolaryngologists, and for example, they wanted a physician appointed to the Interstate Licensure Compact Board, but because of the way licensure compacts work, they do have to be identical or nearly identical language state to state. And since 6 other states had already passed the compact without a physician designee on the board, we weren't able to accept that. But there is a public member, and we after working with the National Association, we indicated we would be fine if the public member were a physician. They had some concerns about telehealth that were frankly not founded, and then there was one clarification to make clear that nothing in the Interstate Licensure Compact, the National Compact Board, could supersede or take any authority over changing state scope of practice laws. Interstate compacts can't do that. It's expressly part of them that the state retains the ability to license, discipline, and regulate the scope of practice. But, you know, we inserted a sentence into the bill that says nothing in this bill would allow the licensure board to direct the scope of practice for the state, because it already doesn't do that. So to me, I'm going to say amongst friends here, I felt that their concerns were fairly superficial. But you know, the way that we work on bills, and you know, Matt and I's priority, and certainly during our time, you know, short time representing you, we would rather be collaborative than not. And so if we were able to take those concerns and make some modest changes that were still in the legal framework of the compact, and that the National Association was comfortable, that's what we chose to do.
Thank you for that clarification.
You bet. So as of now, I feel that we're in good shape on this bill. We obviously do have work to do to move it on to the Senate and then to the governor's desk for signature, but we are as well positioned, I think, as we can be to get that done, having resolved the issues with the medical society and had good conversations with the Senate leadership who will be navigating this bill. Next slide, please. So these are a few other kind of high profile healthcare bills. I do send out, or Matt and I send out to Natalie for you all to receive a legislative update each week. And that is a pretty, we put a fair amount of detail in writing on that. And so I'm just going to touch on these pieces. I'm happy to elaborate on these bills or any other bills that are part of the update that you want to talk more about. And I'm also will pause there to say we are very happy to receive feedback on those newsletters to see, you know, if the information is helpful to you, if there's more, better, different we can be doing. You know, we do want those to be a useful tool. So I'll start with medical malpractice liability. This has been a pretty high profile discussion publicly. Right now, Iowa is one of only a handful of states, maybe 18 or so states, that does not have a hard cap on economic damages in medical malpractice liability cases. And physicians have been seeking that hard cap, well, for a number of years, and have renewed their energies around that. And so we've been seeing a lot of that. The House file you will see there has passed the Iowa House, the House committee, and then the Senate file, which is the same legislation, passed Judiciary Committee this week. We're also seeing quite a lot of conversation on telehealth reimbursement rates. And I actually just got done writing the telehealth update for the newsletter this week. And there are a number of telehealth bills, and they are broken down. The first is for behavioral health services. The second you'll see here, which is House File 706, is for payment parity for physical health care. And then there's also a telehealth that would establish a framework or standards for audio only services when that is appropriate for each professional licensing boards. This has been a high profile, high priority issue for the House. The Senate has been less interested in engaging on it. So we've seen these bills move through the House process and believe we will continue to do so. But I do want to be candid that they do face an uphill climb in the Senate. The Senate really believes that it is more appropriate for the reimbursement for telehealth to be worked out in the contracting process, as opposed to established by the General Assembly. And then the third you'll see here is the Professional Licensure Omnibus Bill. This bill is the same piece of legislation that was passed last year. As an aside, I think that was the last thing, like normal thing I did, was go to the subcommittee on this bill last year. I have a picture of, it's like, you know, I don't know if you've seen this stuff online of like, what's the last normal picture in your phone? And I took a picture of the subcommittee room because we were like crammed in there, all the healthcare organizations, and we were all crowded in there. And now that just looks like, oh, what were we doing? So what this bill does is establishes some standards and some practices for specifically expanding scope of practice, seeking new licensure, and some of the interstate qualifications, not compacts, but what would give a professional permission to practice in the state. The governor did a fairly substantial professional licensure bill last year that actually did pass during the abbreviated session. So I am not certain about the future of this specific bill, but it is definitely one we're watching carefully. You know, anytime we're talking about licensure, there's just a lot of implications. This does give a fair amount of discretion to the professional licensing board, but just keeping an eye on those three. Next slide, please. Okay, so I heard a little bit of Rachel's presentation, but talking about why legislative advocacy matters. I liked her comments about self-advocacy. Iowa is a citizen legislature. They are part-time, although I would argue in the 20 years that I've been working in the Capitol, that the work of a legislator has become less and less part-time, and the expectations have certainly grown for their attention during the interim. But they do have, many of the legislators do have other full-time professional jobs. And you'll see a list there of the types of jobs and the employment that they have. But with that, they are deciding issues about scope of practice, Medicaid oversight, professional liability, professional licensure, and they perhaps don't have a level of personal knowledge or expertise to decide those things. And so I just want to start with, they want to hear from you. You are knowledgeable on your profession. You are their constituent. You know, live and work in their community. You know their constituents, and it is, feedback from you is welcome to them on issues that you care about. And so they will be seeking it when they are trying to educate themselves on some of those issues that you see on the right side of the screen. Next slide, please. So what we have, we have part-time legislators. The session lasts just over 100 days. So in odd numbered years, we go 110 days for the legislative session. In even numbered years, election years, it's 100 days. And so, you know, they generally run, well, the first day of session is always the second Monday in January. And then they run sometime to late April, early May, generally as part of their time frame. You see here, there's limited professional policy staff. The House and Senate, Democrat and Republican, each have a caucus staff. And those individuals are very knowledgeable and very hardworking on the policy areas that they cover. But there are probably only 10 to 12 of them for all of the legislators and all of the policy areas that they work in. Each legislator has multiple committee assignments, and sometimes they are very different. You know, so they might be assigned to the Human Resources Committee, which considers a lot of healthcare bills, and then the Natural Resources Committee. And so they do have to have, you know, their attention pulled in many different directions. Also, there are 1,500 to 2,000 bills introduced annually. So the process of sifting through those and trying to understand them and develop a position on them and to represent their constituents, you know, it's a daunting process. So this is how come, again, I go back to your input really mattering to the policymakers and why they want to hear from you. Next slide, please. So right now in Iowa, this is the current political control. You have Governor Kim Reynolds, who was elected to her first full term in 2018. As you likely know, she served as lieutenant governor under Governor Terry Branstad and became governor when he was named ambassador to China. She was elected outright in 2018, and if she seeks re-election, which I mean, I believe she probably will, she will be up for re-election in 2022. In the Iowa Senate, there are 32 Republicans and 18 Democrats. That is a margin that has been in place now. This is the second election cycle. That did not change with the last election. And in the Iowa House, there are 59 Republicans and 41 Democrats. During the last election, the Republicans picked up 7 seats to expand their majority. So the Republican majorities in governor's office are very solid and well established at the Capitol. Next slide, please. So I think this is the most dangerous slide of this whole presentation. And because anytime you're making generalizations about a person's political party, that is probably not a safe thing to do. But it is also important that there are some pretty substantial philosophical differences that exist between the two parties, and where with the Republicans maintaining the majorities in both chambers and the governor's office, those differences are certainly heightened right now. Next slide, please. But this is the qualifier, right? All of these individual legislators have a wide array or on a large spectrum of different parts of the political spectrum. We also have many, many, many issues that are not partisan in nature. And so their political beliefs wouldn't necessarily inform their position on legislation like, say, the Interstate Licensure Compact. So again, important to acknowledge that there's some pretty entrenched political differences taking place in Iowa right now and around the country, but they are not there's a lot that is happening that is bipartisan in nature and collaborative in nature as well. Next slide, please. Oh boy. So this is the legislative process. I will not read this to you. I will date myself and point out, if you get a chance to watch the Schoolhouse Rock about the bill sitting on Capitol Hill, that was a big favorite of mine. I grew up pretty geeky on this stuff. But the short version of this little flow chart is how a bill moves through the process. So it starts with an idea, and we can use the Interstate Licensure Compact as that. That idea was ours, obviously, and we brought it to the chair of the State Government Committee, Representative Bobby Kaufman, and also talked with Representative Joe Mitchell because they had engaged with us on this subject before. They agreed to have a bill drafted. So that bill goes to the Legislative Services Agency. There's a group of about a dozen lawyers who draft all the bills. But you remember before I said there's like 1,500 to 2,000 bills every session. Those attorneys have to make sure that everything complies with the Iowa Code and meets legal standards. And it is an incredibly difficult job. Once the bill is drafted, it is either sent to the Speaker of the House or the Senate President, and the bill is given a number and assigned to a committee. So, and sometimes those committee assignments are really straightforward. A natural resources bill is typically easy to identify, but sometimes on licensure bills in particular, they may go to the State Government Committee or they may go to the Human Resources Committee, dependent upon kind of the level of interest of the chair and where things lie. Once the bill is assigned to committee, the committee chair assigns a subcommittee, which is almost always 3 people. It's usually 2 Republicans and 1 Democrat. Occasionally, once or twice a session, we might see a subcommittee made up of 5 legislators, which would be 3 Republicans and 2 Democrats. That's usually on kind of big, heavy, meaty, hefty policy bills. Like, I don't know if you recall, a few years ago, there was a very big opioid piece of legislation that was attempting to address some of the opioid epidemic. And that was a 5-person subcommittee. But those probably only happen once or twice a session. So once a bill is assigned a subcommittee, that is our opportunity, our best opportunity to influence and publicly speak on the legislation. During pandemic times, both the House and Senate have a Zoom or a WebEx option for participation in the subcommittee. During non-pandemic times, those meetings are public and anyone can attend, and they often are a little bit hectic. Sometimes we're in a crowded room at the Capitol, but everyone has an opportunity to speak, share concerns, request amendments. That is the most collaborative and public part of the process. And often where the most work gets done. As I mentioned, back on the Interstate Licensure Compact, that's where we worked out the amendment with the Medical Society and so on. So once the bill has passed subcommittee, it then moves to the full committee for consideration. And then from the full committee, it goes to either the House or Senate floor. And then the process repeats in the other chamber. After all of that, the bill moves to the governor's desk for her signature or veto. On policy bills, the governor only has the ability to sign totally or veto totally a bill. On appropriations bills, she is able to item veto or remove pieces of legislation so long as it keeps the intent of the bill intact. Next slide, please. So those who are more visually minded, this is how it goes, the little nesting dolls. Subcommittee, standing committee, full chamber, repeat it, and then to the governor's desk. So that's a little easier picture than all those little bubbles in the flow chart. Next slide, please. So when we talk about today's objectives, this is a little bit of a slide for when we are more able to gather in person. But I know that your next presenter is Representative Brent Siegrist, who you have an opportunity to do a legislative panel, but not today. But when you do have the opportunity to visit the Capitol, I do hope you will. It is by far the most beautiful space. I mean, I just love going to work there every day. In a prior profession, I worked as the policy director for Governor Chet Culver during his time in office. And I had a key to the back door of the Capitol, like an actual physical key. And about halfway through my tenure there, they changed it so you could use like your ID badge to badge in. But it was never lost on me those days that I would, walk up and insert a key into the back door of the Capitol to go to work. It was just wonderful. Getting to know your legislator is an important part of this process. And back to where I started, they want to get to know you. When I was working in state government, we did new legislator trainings as part of our work. And we told legislators and House, Senate, Democrat, Republican, that what they need to do is identify those people, reach out to those people in their communities who have a particular interest or expertise, because there's going to be so many issues that come before them. So to know the people that they can call when they have a question or when they want to hear from them, that we have an opportunity, to offer that to them so that they don't have to try to come find you or come find us. And so that opportunity just to introduce yourself to your legislator and make it known that you're willing to be a resource on these issues, to ask them questions about what their priorities are, about pieces of legislation that are working through the process, maybe why they voted or supported or didn't support something that you care about, either professionally or personally. And then the other thing I would say is to thank them for their service to the state. I know that these legislators run for office, they raise money, it is a job that they seek, but it is a public service. And in many cases, it comes at a great sacrifice to their family and their professional lives. And so to thank them for taking the time and for caring, and even if we don't always see eye to eye, it's an important role that they fill. Next slide, please. So this is just logistically, if you have the opportunity to visit the Capitol. And if you do, I hope that, Matt and I's contact information is, included on stuff, but we would be happy individually if, I know coming in a group right now isn't really possible, but individually or in smaller groups, we'd be more than happy to take you around. But in order to get legislators out of the chambers, so you can see the little note there, there's a little table, both outside the House and Senate chamber and then inside the lounge of both the House and Senate. And lounge is a pretty generous term for what this is. It's kind of a small room with a little table. And you fill this out, you fill out this note. There's things up at the top you can see on the left that has like their seat number and to make sure you're spelling their name correctly, where you're from. And you send the note in with either a doorman or a page, and then the note comes back out either with the legislator or without to talk with them about what you do. That process can be a little bit time consuming, maybe even a little bit clunky, but it's the best one we've got for getting their attention when they're on the floor of the House and the Senate. They don't have staff, they have clerks who handle kind of a lot of administrative stuff, but it is kind of difficult to schedule with them. Matt and I do have maybe all of the legislators' cell phone numbers, or a lot of them anyway. And so if you do visit, sometimes we can like text and see if we can track them down. We also know where they hide a lot of times too, so we can help find people. And then just always important where the restrooms are. You know, this is a key issue here for folks. Next slide, please. That's the end of my presentation. I'm certainly happy to take any questions. One of the things I realized as I was doing a lot of talking here is that I know that many of you are working, you know, and supporting schools and school districts, and that there's been an awful lot of education legislation this session. And so if you want me to spend a little time on that, I'm also happy to talk about that. I know we included in our update. So if anybody wants to hear a little bit more about that, I'm happy to cover that as well. Oh, I see Emily says, yes, please. Okay. So this legislative session, maybe more than any that I've seen in a while, there is some pretty big stuff happening around particularly public education. So there is a bill that was the governor's education reform legislation that contained many provisions. The more high profile of those provisions were the establishment of education savings accounts, sometimes referred to as vouchers, for the 30 districts that are deemed in need of support or remediation. There's a term of art that I'm not pulling out of my head right now, but those 30 school districts, students would be able to take the funds associated with their per pupil funding and use that in an education savings account to attend private school. This has been a pretty controversial issue. So I'll kind of talk through those things real quick. We have expansion to the charter school process of how charter schools are established. And most notably, they don't have to be established under a school board. We have the elimination of the voluntary diversity plan for the purposes of determining open enrollment. And that there are 5 school districts that have a voluntary diversity plan. It is Des Moines, Waterloo, Postville, West Liberty, and Davenport. And right now, they are able to use the voluntary diversity plan in order to determine open enrollment decisions. The provision of that bill would eliminate that. And then there are some administrative functions. A single IT system, which is often a Power School or Infinite Campus would be ones that are most common to get to a common technology, and a few other sort of maybe more technical changes. The Senate passed that bill as a total package. It has passed the Senate and was referred to the House. The House took those pieces and broke them into 3 different bills. Oh, actually 4. So there's a diversity plan bill, there's a charter school bill, there's the education savings account bill, and then there's a bill that kind of captures all of those other maybe more administrative pieces. And so right now, the House has passed the voluntary diversity plan. So that policy has passed both the House and Senate, although in different forms. So they're going to need to reconcile that. So I do believe that will ultimately go on to final passage. There's not sufficient support in the House for education savings accounts, and that bill failed to advance in committee. But I suspect that conversations on that will continue through the end of the session. The charter school bill did pass through the House committee, as did the kind of broader administrative functions. The last bill that I want to cover very quickly, there's a bill, Senate File 168, that would change the way that special education services are delivered in non-public settings and provide the parent with more discretion and direction over that process. So if you were a parent of a special needs child who had opted for a non-public school, it would just give greater weight to your preferences for where and when those services are delivered. That bill, as it's written, is not going to advance. It did not pass the Senate State Government Committee or Senate Education Committee because of some legal concerns, especially federal education requirements. But I suspect we will see through this process of the legislative session an attempt to try to deal with some additional services for children in non-public school settings. as an amendment or legislation attached to another one of these bills. I went through that really quick. Anybody have any questions? Oh, I see. Hold on. I see one real quick from Stacy. For those who cannot physically visit the Capitol, do you think email or social media are effective in getting a legislator's attention? Yes, if you live in their district, is my answer to that. I also think a phone call or sending a brief email and asking for time to schedule a phone call is also quite effective. What I do think can be less effective, legislators get really frustrated when they get like 150 emails that are all identical and from people outside of their district. They, it's the term that they often use instead of grassroots is it's astroturf, because it's, it's not an authentic contact. So what I would say is to send, an email introducing yourself, an issue or two that you want to raise to their attention, and then here's my address, here's my cell phone. I'd welcome the opportunity to schedule some time to talk to you. I think that's a very effective way to get their attention, especially if you live in their district. Let me see what else is in the chat. Question is, can I please share what I know about the Lead K bill? Yes, there was a Lead K bill. I think this is my first session working with you all, but I have been aware of the Lead K bill for at least 2 or 3 years. This legislation's been around for a little while. As I think that we have some concerns with the legislation, in particular the work group section of that legislation. The bill has advanced through the process, but I don't see right now that there is substantial support for it to continue on through the House and ultimately the Senate. There's not really consensus around the bill. We have raised concern about that section and have talked with legislators about it. So if it does continue to advance, I believe there would be an amendment that would address a lot of our concerns on that bill. Okay, I'm going back to the chat. Okay, so the question about back to the use of emails. I don't know that I think that form emails are, and for people who are in the chat, the question is, those form emails from ISHA or others. I don't think form emails are bad. I think, using that as a template when you are contacting your own legislator is absolutely just fine. It is when you would potentially use that form email to send an email to all 150 legislators that they tend to get frustrated, or when they're looking at their email and there's 200 messages going that are all the same. I do think taking a moment to add a personalized line or two is helpful, and I do not want to discourage anyone from responding to those advocacy alerts. Those are important, but I would target either your own House or Senate member, or if as a legislator you have a particular relationship with, maybe you've met them or you've talked with them about things before, rather than going to the whole entirety of the House and Senate. Let's see, has the voucher bill been considered in smaller districts? So it's 30 districts. So the question is the concern about families leaving public schools for private, like in a small district for private school in a larger district. The bill that is before the legislature right now would only be for 30 school districts. And I can see if I can find that list and send it to Natalie so that you all could take a look. There's a term of art that I cannot pull out of my head right now, but it's basically schools that are at risk of failure or are in need of remediation. And so that's what it would only be, those 30 districts, but it does capture, say, Des Moines, which has more public school presence, or private school, non-public school presence. So I do think, yes, it is a mix of small districts and larger districts, but I suspect the larger districts would be more affected just because there's generally more capacity there in the non-public setting. Okay, so the question, Republicans in Scott County have decided not to attend any of the monthly legislative forums, and many have not set their own forums. What do we do when they don't want to hear from us? I think that's where I would go back to that individual contact. And I mean, I guess in the end, you can't make somebody who doesn't want to talk to you, but I would go back to that individual introduction, email, offer to set up time for a phone call, offer to set up time for a cup of coffee if you're willing to spend that time, a little more time at it. That is my best guess. And then when there's a space that we all feel more comfortable gathering, if you have an opportunity to come to the Capitol, Matt and I can help facilitate a meeting in that way as well. Question, when would we predict the interstate compact bill would make it to the governor's desk if all goes well in the Senate? It's a good question. Target adjournment is April 30th. I would expect that if all goes well, that this bill would be done well before then. It would be my hope that it would be the end of March or early April. It'll have to pass committee. So we'll do, subcommittee, full committee, and then it has to go on the debate calendar. And during this different funnel time, the House and Senate do restrict debate. Like this week, I don't think the Senate debated on the floor at all. They focused entirely on committee work. So sometimes it just takes a little while to get those things scheduled. But that would be my best hope, is either the end of this month or early April. Fingers crossed. We're going to do all we can. I'm a student at the University of Iowa, but I'm registered to vote out of state. When writing letters to representatives, would it be appropriate to write Iowa legislation on state federal issues, even if I'm not a registered voter in their district? Yes. And I think I would just make that clear that you're, a student here, you care about the state, you'd like to share your thoughts. I mean, you're living here, you're participating in the community. So yes, I think it's absolutely appropriate. You guys are asking great questions. I feel like I've talked a lot. Does anybody else want to talk for a minute? Anybody have anything else they want to add? Something I may have left out?
What would you say is the general attitude of lobbyists in the Capitol, and how do lobbyists really play a role in our legislature specifically? Many times we have this idea of what lobbyists are like from national level politics, which is different than Iowa. So what would you say about lobbyists and our legislature?
Oh, that's a very good question. Thank you. So it's funny. I'll tell a little story about that. I was carpooling and walking with a person my kids swim, and it was a swim meet, and a person that I didn't know well. And so we were walking while our kids were at practice, and she asked me what I did for a living. And I said, "Oh, I'm a lobbyist." And her face was like, she had a horrified reaction to that. And I'm like, whoa, okay. So I do think, yes, the perception of lobbyists, that there's a lot of backroom deals, or, that there's unseemly behavior. But in the end, it's our job you have absolutely every reason to organize as a professional association. And then the next extension of that is you are not able, the government plays a pretty significant role on what and how you do your job. And so to engage somebody who can work on your behalf with lawmakers is wholly appropriate. And many of these things, there are issues. We have a number of clients, and there are times where I just feel fantastic about what we're working on, and other times where I'm really fine that Uber is going to be fine no matter whether I'm good at this or not good at it. So some of it's a little bit transactional, and some of it you get really passionate about. But in the end, my credibility both to you and to lawmakers is to be knowledgeable about the policy, to present forthright information, to advocate on your behalf in a way that has integrity. And so I think that is the mindset of 99% of my colleagues, is they're there to represent their client and represent their client's interest and do a good job. And very rarely do you see the kind of shady dealings that are perhaps sometimes associated with the work of being a lobbyist. I'm not saying it's never happened, but it's pretty rare. This session, we've been forced to be pretty creative. You know, like many people, I was home for 10 months and had not been in a public space like that for a long time. And so, you know, there's not a mask mandate, for example, in the building. So, you know, you go in and, you know, you're trying to mask and maintain distance, but it is still an interactive, a personally interactive job. I mean, relationships are at the heart of it and credibility is at the heart of it. And so it's been a little bit of a strange session, but I think we're really finding our way through it and trying to be creative and flexible, and the policymakers are doing the same. And, you know, people, knock wood, have so far stayed healthy. So, you know, I think but there are a lot fewer people in the building than there usually are this session.
Kate, I have a question.
Yeah.
Stephanie.
Hi, Stephanie.
Hi. So we're really lucky to have you working for us here in the state of Iowa. And I'm just curious, for anyone who might go to another state, is there an easy way to look up bills that might be affecting us, you know, me personally, or, you know, me, my profession, my patients? Is there, because I go to that state legislative website and it can be pretty overwhelming.
It is. It is. I agree.
So is there just an easy way to search, you know, I don't know, is there a way to search audiology or hearing loss or something, that a trick that you can share that we might be able to find bills that would affect us?
So I do spend some amount, and thank you for the compliment too, that I really do appreciate that. I do spend some time looking at other states' websites, especially like if we're trying to compare legislation from another state or things like that. And most of them do have a keyword or subject matter search available. But I agree, even with that, it can be, you know, you could put in audiology and have 30 bills pop up, and it can be hard to know, do you have, you know, is this a bill that is going to advance, or, you know, sometimes bills are filed for lots of reasons. Sometimes someone's trying to prove a point or do something on behalf of a constituent, or, you know, that legislation that may never land on a governor's desk can get introduced, and that can be really hard to sift through. And Natalie might know the answer to this, but I do believe that the speech language nationally, I do believe they have lobbyists in most states. And so my advice would be to reach out to you know, ISHA and see if they would give you the contact information for the lobbyists in the state. I mean, we keep a list of bills that we're working on your behalf, and that would be something I would be happy to share with someone from another state. And I can't imagine that my colleagues in other states wouldn't have the same reaction.
Thank you.
You bet. Looks like, Natalie, it looks like Matt's coming into the waiting room, which is well timed. You guys have been a really terrific group to talk with. Your questions have been super engaging. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Kate. Yep, we've got Matt connected here, so we'll just give him a second to
Hey, Matt.
get
Hey, hi Kate.
audio and
Hey, everybody. We're not muted, right? We're good. Okay. Should I move ahead, Natalie, with Brent?
yes, yep, we're ready for you to start. Matt, will you be introducing Representative Siegrist?
That's what I'm going to do.
Sounds good. Thanks, Matt.
Real pleased. Hello, everybody. I'm Matt 80, part of your lobby team, and just got out of committee, but I'm here in the state capitol with Brent Siegrist, who is a Republican state representative from Council Bluffs. Some of you know Brent from his days with the AEAs, but Brent's a Council Bluffs native, was a high school teacher and coach. And then in '84, he decided to run for the legislature, served 9 terms, that's 18 years, was elected by his colleagues as majority leader, and then as Speaker of the Iowa House. Brent left the legislature in 2002, and he worked for the AEAs in the interim and retired from the AEAs, and decided this last election in 2020 to run again, and was easily elected by the residents of Council Bluffs. And Brent is an assistant leader. The speaker and majority leader wanted someone of his age and experience and sage advice giver to be on the leadership team. So his colleagues in the Republican caucus did select him to be a leader. And I'm going to turn it over to Brent to just, I think, talk about advocacy and kind of his committees and field some questions from everyone. So here's State Representative Brent Siegrist.
Big thrill, I know. Thanks for having me today. All Matt did there was to tell everybody I'm old, which I appreciate, and that would be a fair statement. But glad to be here with you today and just kind of run through a few things and then ask questions throughout or whenever you want to. I'll just cover a couple of things and we can talk about advocacy or whatever you may want to talk about. So this is funnel week at the Capitol, which is simply a self-imposed deadline for bills to get through a committee. In a general assembly, you probably have maybe 2,000 bills that are introduced, and in the end, you might pass 200, 190 bills, give or take a few on any given year. So you have to have a system where all those bills will be kind of funneled down or winnowed down to a manageable number. And so that's what this day, tomorrow is, the end of the week, March 5th. Basically says that a House filed bill has to be out of the House committee in order to remain alive, and a Senate filed bill has to be out of the Senate committee in order to remain alive. The two major exceptions to that are Ways and Means bills, which are tax and revenue bills, and then your appropriations bills. But other than that, they need to move through your committee process. And then there's a second funnel in about 3 weeks, which would say that House files have to be passed by the House and then out of the Senate committee to remain viable. And the same thing would be true of Senate files have to be passed by the Senate, passed out of the House. So we will still have committee meetings, but the committee meetings will dwindle quite a bit after this week. We'll spend a lot of time next week in debate passing House files so they can be considered in the Senate. But the process is to get those bills down to a reasonable number. So there will be bills that pass out of committee that some of you will consider crazy, and that is absolutely the way the system works, and that's the way it's set up to work. At its best, the legislature is really a marketplace of ideas where you can have conversations and talk about things, and sometimes to different people on different sides of the aisle, they just seem terrible and crazy, and I get that. But that's the way the system works. Sometimes bills are introduced. We had a bill today in state government, which I won't get into, that clearly is probably unconstitutional, but it was a bill that it's a conversation we need to have. And so you pass that bill in order to foster the conversation. Some of the things you've heard about this year, for example, about trying to get rid of Facebook or Google or Microsoft, if they censor freedom of speech and we take away all these tax incentives, totally unworkable. But at the same time, those are issues that need to have some talk about them because there are some pretty serious ramifications about what's going on on social media. So I guess what I'm saying is when you hear some of those things, always feel free to reach out to your local legislator or to Matt and Kate, who do a wonderful job for you all, because sometimes those bills are going nowhere and you may get all agitated by them, but in reality, it's a conversation starter or it's a bill that somebody back home really wants you to have introduced, and you know full well that it's not going to go anywhere. And then in the end, the majority leader makes the decision on what bills were brought up on the floor or not brought up on the floor. So the point is there'll be bills passed out of committee this week that aren't going to go anywhere, but some of the bills that are passed out will go someplace. And just a quick example, we passed out a bottle bill today. So the bottle bill redemption issue that nobody can seem to get a handle on. We passed a bill out that I frankly don't like at all, but I voted yes to get it out of committee so we can continue to work on it. You have to keep a vehicle, if you will, alive so that you can continue to work with the different groups to see if you can come up with an agreed to compromise. So again, bills are flying fast and furious around here, and some of them will actually see debate and others will just kind of die a quiet death in somebody's drawer, the majority leader's drawer probably. So that's what's going on. Some of the major issues this year, have been education, and some of the things in education have been pretty controversial. On the other hand, some of them have gone fairly well. There'll be a 2.4% increase for K-12 funding next year. We did pass a bill that requires in-person learning starting last February 15th, which was pretty controversial, but the fact of the matter is most of the state was already back to in-person learning. We've also passed in the House a bill for $27.4 million of one-time money to give the school districts based on how many days they were in-person learning to cover some of the costs that were put on them by the COVID crisis. There are differences of opinion. For example, the Senate bill punishes Des Moines because they're mad at Des Moines. And around here, a lot of people don't like Des Moines, but they're punishing Des Moines because they don't think that they were doing as much in person as they could have been. On the House side, we don't agree with that. We said, look, they were in person and followed the rules the way they're set up X amount of time, and they should get money for that like everybody else. So there are differences, obviously, between the two chambers, but education's got a lot of talk. We did pass a series of child care bills, which we think are very, very important to help with child care credit, tax credits, as well as reimbursement for child care centers, as well as trying to encourage businesses that are large enough to have child care facilities or services at their places of employment. Those have all been some pretty good things. Yesterday, we did pass a $128 million tax bill, which basically simply says that on all the federal money that came into the state for unemployment insurance or for the PPP, Paycheck Protection Program for small businesses, that they don't have to pay taxes on those. So we're refunding the money for that. So that was actually $128 million that are going back to the people that were directly affected by the COVID crisis. And we'll be seeing they already had the money taken out of their unemployment checks or whatever. That means they'll be getting a refund. So that was one good thing that we did yesterday. The governor has a large initiative on rural broadband rollout, which is a very, very important issue. And the real question comes down to how do you do it and at what speed do you need it? The governor's proposal is to make it the speed of 100 megs or however you say that, which would be the leader in the nation. And while I love that idea, we also need to make sure that even if it's a slower speed, we need to at least get access to all parts of rural Iowa. So it's a great proposal, very expensive, $150 million a year for 3 years. I think you'll see action on that by the legislature this year. I doubt it'll be $150 million because frankly, I don't think they can spend that efficiently given the short time frame, but you will see some movement on that. So there's a whole variety of issues out there that affect people across the state that we're working on. And then the last thing, and I could talk endlessly, you've already figured that out about whatever you'd like to talk about. The last thing I would throw in there is the budget. The budget is the next big part of what we have to do in the state. And frankly, that's the only thing we really need to do as a legislative body is to pass a budget every year that provides for public safety and public education. But other than that, that's the only thing we absolutely have to do. The budget and the economy in Iowa is in pretty good shape. For whatever reason, we've been able to endure the pandemic fairly well. I mean, a lot of people have suffered, but with the federal money that's come in and some of the other things the state has done, we're in pretty good shape, frankly. So we will begin work on the budget pretty much in earnest in the next couple of weeks. We have a system that calls for the Revenue Estimating Conference, which is a 3-person committee, and they meet and they say, here is what our best guess is as to what the revenues will be. And whatever that number is, and for next year, it's like $8.2 billion. The legislature can spend 99% of that. The other 1% is supposed to flow over into a cash reserve fund or an ending balance, so you don't hopefully get into too bad of a situation if revenues don't come in as expected. They meet in December, and that number they give us is what the governor built your budget off of, which she has done. And then they will meet again March 19th, so 2 weeks from tomorrow, to revise that number. And then if they were to revise the number down, then the governor would have to resubmit her budget to reflect the new level of funding. If they do a new estimate and it's up, the good thing is we don't get to spend any more money. That money just flows over again in case revenues are not coming in as expected. So we anticipate at worst, they'll say everything's good that we said in December. I think frankly, they may raise the revenue estimates a little bit. So then after they do that, we'll really down to the nitty gritty of funding the state government. And then lastly on that part, and I will shut up, is it's a little complicated this year because of the amount of federal money coming in, the CARES money and what have you. We have to be really, really careful to not spend some of the federal money coming in on ongoing programs, because that federal money is going to go away in a couple of years, of course, depending on the newest, whatever it is, $1.9 trillion budget package they're debating in the Senate, I think, maybe today or next week. We have to make sure that when that money runs out, we haven't established a bunch of programs that we won't be able to continue to fund. So we're being very cautious, and that complicates things. K-12 schools, for example, in the CARES Act, the first two bills they have passed from the feds got about $310 million coming into our K-12 system, which is wonderful and great, and it needs to be used hopefully to catch kids up from some of the learning they've lost, or to help kids with disabilities or internet connection, wherever it may be. We need to make sure that money is spent properly, but doesn't set us up for a shortfall in the future. In the Medicaid program in particular, which eats up a lot of our budget, normally in a normal year, our increases in Medicaid are $150 million. Next year, because of all the federal money coming in, we're projecting like $25 million increase, which is wonderful, but that money will go away in 2 years. And so we have to be really cautious about how we spend it and don't set up programs we can't continue to fund. And then the last example on that would be like rural broadband. There is money, particularly with the pandemic related internet connectivity issues, that can be used for that. So as we look at the governor's proposal, we want to use as much as we can of the federal money because it's a one-time project. The rural broadband rollout is infrastructure, and so we can use one-time money for that. And so our efforts have been complicated by simply the fact that this federal money, which is wonderful, although it's all increasing the debt on everybody else, but we needed to do it, that we use it as judiciously as we possibly can. So you might not be interested in any of that. If so, I apologize. If not, I apologize. But other than that, I can visit about advocacy or whatever, but I might open it up to Kate or whomever if you have anything specific you'd like me to address. Or I can take Matt downtown for a beer, whatever you. Wait, I have one more committee. I can't do that. I'm sorry. Anything?
I have a question.
Okay.
My name's Rachel Sudduth, and I'm the president of ISHA. And I wanted to know a little bit more about how you originally decided to run for the legislature and what you feel like you've learned the most over your time serving in the state of Iowa.
Okay. Now I've run twice, right? So to be brutally honest, the first time I ran, I had too many beers. And I was a wrestling coach. If I stood up, you'd figure that out. I'm not a basketball player. I'm a wrestler. And literally a wild hair. And I taught government. I was a high school teacher. I taught government. I was very interested in politics, but I wasn't going to run. And there wasn't anybody running on the Republican side. And I'm a Republican, although the first 9 times I ran, the teachers union endorsed me. So I'm a moderate. In today's Republican Party, I'm probably a flaming liberal, which probably just makes me at best a conservative because both parties have gone kind of off the rails on either side. But I was always interested but I'm not being flippant. I mean, I really did. They were trying to talk me into it. We were talking over beers and stuff like, okay, sure, why not? I had no idea what I was getting into. So that's how it happened. But the reality you run is because you'd like to think you can make a difference. And I think over the years I have done that. There are generally 2 types of people that run, and most of them, almost all of them, run because they want to do something. You do have people that get into politics at all levels that run because they want to be somebody for the title. which is okay, but that's not the best way to run. But, I thought I knew a little bit about politics and I could be effective. And as it turned out, I was actually pretty good at it. And so that's why you run, is to try to affect a difference. It's difficult, though, depending if you're in the minority and the majority parties here. If you're in the majority party, it's much easier because you control things. And when you're in a minority, it's much harder because you really can't get much done. So my first 8 years, boy, I'm old. My first 8 years, I was in the minority. And actually, I got along very well with the Democratic Party. I was a young urban guy. I was single at that time. And so I was kind of relatively effective for a minority party member. Then we took control and my colleagues elected me my majority leader, in which case you really do have an opportunity to get some things done. And I could go through a variety of things that I was proud of when I left the legislature that I had a part of getting some things done, particularly in natural resources and recreational opportunities, education, so on. But that's easier to do when you're in the majority. So, and truth be known, my very first year as majority leader, I had a young intern who had hair, who was a third-year law Drake student, whose name was Matt Eady. So Matt and I go, and we go way back. And Matt, I don't know how we ended up that way, but he was my intern, my first year as majority leader. And so you run to make a difference, and I think we did that. And when I ran the second time, I had retired from the area education agencies. I wasn't looking to do anything. We had an open seat in Council Bluffs, an urban seat. It's a very swing district, literally a third Republicans, a third Democrats, third independent. And we had somebody who wanted to run that could not have gotten elected because they were too far right. And they approached me, and I had the time, and I'm like, okay, I can do this for another, 2, 4, 6 years. I mean, I'll run again. And after that, I don't know. But again, you ran because it's like, I think I can help. The biggest difference I'm seeing right now is it's a much more bitter or partisan place up here by far. And that's a reflection of national politics as much as anything else. And that has to do with social media and the 24-hour, 24/7 news cycle. Anybody who has an opinion on either side, they can find somebody to validate that opinion somewhere in technology. And so it's become a more partisan and less collegial place here. Although everybody still gets along pretty well. It's just, there's just more of an edge here, which I find unfortunate, particularly because, again, I'm a more moderate basis, if you will. And so I continue to get along, I think, pretty well with everybody, but that's the biggest problem. I would say this, in getting into advocacy and so on, about 80% of the bills we pass up here are unanimous. I mean, everybody votes for it. And then I always say about 12% of the rest of the bills that we pass are, you got to have some give and take, some compromise. And then, like 92 of the 100 members will vote for it. Some people may not vote for it, but most of them do. But then it's those last 8%. That's what you all read about in the paper, because that's where there are differences between the parties. And that's where you really fight. And the party in control usually gets their way. But in reality, we get along pretty well on most issues, but there are fundamental differences between the parties. And so that's what manifests itself. As you advocate as in your association or in your profession or your personal life, one thing you need to remember is there's 150 people up here, 100 in the House, 50 in the Senate, and they all, every single one of them, are well-intentioned, well-meaning, and they think they're doing the right thing, even if you think they're crazy. I mean, the fact of the matter is they got elected by talking about what they talked about, and you may diametrically be opposed to that, but they got elected and they think they're doing the right thing, even when you don't. And so as you advocate, you have to recognize that. Even when you feel like you might feel like you're beating your head against the wall talking to somebody, fact of the matter is that's their opinion. It needs to be respected. They got elected. And if it's somebody that you don't agree with, then you work to maybe defeat them in the next election. But everybody up here has good intentions. There's no doubt about it. The problem we have now is we've got in both parties, too many people further to the right or further to the left, and not enough that are in the middle. If you're a moderate, then you're squishy or whatever. And I just don't subscribe to that. I subscribe to trying to get to the basis of what's the best thing for everybody we can. Understanding that there are issues where I don't care what you say, I'm over here, and if I'm in the majority, we're going to win that debate. But I want to work with you as much as I can. So what I've said to some of our new members this year, because apparently I have a little experience here, there were 14 new House Republicans come in, and what you tell them is the problem we have up here right now, I think, is and in society as a whole, too many people, everything's black and white. Everything's like, this is what I believe and I'm right and I believe it. As I say, often wrong, never in doubt. And the fact of the matter is, in life, there's a lot of gray. There's a lot of like, yeah, I see what you're saying. How can we work together? So there are issues everybody should be black and white on. Whatever your basic core values are, that's black and white. I'm not going to compromise those. But in other things, you need to see if there's a middle ground so you can bring more people, get more people involved and bring them on board. So I think part of the problem we have up here is people look at things too much black and white and not enough that gray area. And they're too set. They're too they're ideologues on some issues, and it's okay on some issues, but a lot of issues aren't that way. So for example, some of these child care bills, we had some people saying, well, I don't think we should be subsidizing some of those things because a parent should raise their child. It's like, okay, I respect that. But the fact of the matter is Iowa has the highest population of two parent worker families in the nation, and we need to help out with child care. And so just because you may think a parent's better raising their child, and sure, I'm sure they are, the fact of the matter is we have people that need child care facilities, particularly in rural Iowa, and we need to do all we can to facilitate that. So while you may think one thing, if it's not a bedrock principle, then you need to be saying, yeah, we need to do these things for child care for other people because it's going to help them. So you try to look at the greater good as much as you can, and that's kind of what we're lacking. So I will say this, I spent 10 years as leader of the House. Okay, I'm old. So it's from 92 to 2002. And I will tell you in the last 2 months, I've probably gotten beaten up more on issues in those 2 months than I had in the 10 years as the leader, because people are so set in their ways now. So because I'm kind of more squishy moderate, right? I got Republicans mad at me because of this, and I got Democrats mad at me because of this. And it's just a nastier climate, and I can generally talk to them and we get over it, but it's a tougher climate. So as you advocate, and you should, I mean, you always need to advocate, do it with a good deal of respect and with the proper information. And when they tell you something you don't believe, or you have information that's different, feel free to call them on it, but do it in a respectful way and state your point. The other thing I would say, what really resonates around here is when you can give a legislator a specific example of how it affects your kids or whatever it may be, rather than this generics about, well, everybody thinks this is a bad idea. It's easier to say, well, we've got some kid with a hearing problem, and here's, if you don't fund this, this is what it's going to mean, long-term costs, things like that. Bring it something local, and that helps them understand what you're talking about. So did I answer your question? I went on a long time. So
Absolutely. Thank you.
if you're interested, get involved. That's the best way to impact things, no doubt. What else? Matt, anything you want me to talk about? Looks like most people are still awake. I'm not sure, but.
Any other questions?
The services you all provide are essential. Thank you for what you do. As many, as you affect a lot of people's lives and helping with what you do. So thank you for that. And, continue to be involved in the process, and do reach out to your legislators when you have issues. They do want to hear from you. They really do. It's helpful to them. Rather than just saying, I'm not going to talk to them. The reality is they do like to hear from you. Some people are more approachable than others. There's no doubt about that. But nonetheless, reaching out to them is important. I would say this too. We get so many emails It's just crazy now. I mean, I just looked at mine. I've got like 387 I haven't even opened. And they come from all over the state, which, and I hopefully over the weekend, I'll open them. And I look at them, I see what they're about. But I don't answer them all if they're not from my area. I mean, I'm in Council Bluffs. If I get something from Davenport, I do look at what they're saying, whatever the bill is, but I don't answer unless they piss me off. Then I answer them. But if they don't do that, I delete them. So one thing you do, if you are contacting somebody in your immediate area, somewhere in your heading or in the right away, say, hey, I'm a constituent, or I live in Powesheik County by where you represent, because they're going to be more likely to take that into in effect. Again, not that they're not paying attention to you, it's the volume's just overwhelming. And so, I mean, I try to answer all of them from anywhere near me, but on the other side of the state, I don't. So that's just a little tip, I think, that will get you a little, make sure that it gets read. And if you have time and you can call and stuff, that's always better, but emails are one good way to advocate. And coming to the Capitol, if normally you'd have a day at the Capitol, be able to do that. And if I was anywhere else, I'd have my mask on, but I don't care about Matt's health, so it's just me and him in here. And I've already had COVID, and I think I'm getting my vaccine tomorrow, but otherwise, hopefully next year you'll be back up here, and that's the most effective way is face-to-face, but email works very well also. Anything else?
I have a question. Can you kind of explain like what the role of a staffer is?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'll roll in lobbyists there too. This place is run by staffers, just like the United States Congress is. What happens, and again, I came in with a class of 14 new House Republicans, and there are 4 new Democrats. And what I told them was, I just talked to one of them in the hallway before we came in, Representative Eddie Andrews, who's an African-American guy from Urbandale. And he's just overwhelmed by it because he wants to do everything and read everything. And what we tell him is, around here, you're going to get appointed to your committees. And what you want to do is make sure you understand the bills in your committees. Make sure you really understand what's going on in your committees. I know if you don't serve on ag, and you may want to know what's going on in ag, and go ahead and try, but it's just overwhelming. You can't do it. And so what you do is you focus in on your areas that you're in. By the way, my committees are local government, transportation, natural resources, state government, which does a lot of heavy lifting, and education appropriations subcommittee. And I've served on other committees in my previous time. And so those were things that just interested me this time. So that's where I focus. And that's what you need to do. So on the other issues that are coming out of other committees, what we tell legislators do is find somebody you trust, find somebody on those committees that has a kind of a like-mindedness, and you can kind of follow them because you may not know everything that's going on in those committees. In that, the staff is essential on both sides. Obviously, we think we have the best staff here. The Democrats think they have the best staff here. And I know quite a few of the Democrat staffers, they're all very, very good. Their job is to get you all of the information you need. If a constituent calls in or writes in with some issue, you don't know the answer, each one of the committees has a staffer, and you go to them and say, hey, can I get this information? And they just do tremendous work getting you information. If I've got a bill and I'm running a bill, they'll get you, they do an analysis on each and every bill so that you've got a piece of paper in front of you that summarizes all the legal crap that's in the bills that nobody can understand because they're all lawyers, and then they break it down into real language. And so, I mean, they are essential to the process here on both parties. And frankly, the two-party staffers, they get along pretty well because they're in the same boat together. They may have different opinions, but they combine and make sure that the information is accurate. So they are there to make sure a legislator looks good back home with information, and to make sure a legislator understands what's going on, and to explain things to them so that they have a basic knowledge for what they need to do. On top of that, then you have the lobbyists like Matt and Kate. And lobbyists get a bad name, if you will, or not reputation, but, lobbyists, some places they are evil or what have you. I don't think that's true. And around here, it's certainly not true. Lobbyists play a very, very, very key role here by providing all the information, if it's speech and hearing, or if it's agricultural products, or if it's, medical malpractice, tort reform, whatever it may be. Those lobbyists present you as a legislator with all the pertinent information, as does your staff. But the lobbyists are paid to present that information. And what we tell legislators is, listen, they're never going to lie to you, because if they do, they're done. I mean, you just, if a lobbyist gives false information, they lose all credibility. And Matt and Kate are amongst the best up here, and that's why they have so many clients. But they're there to give you the information. But what we tell new members is, understand they're giving you the information with the spin of their organization on there. They're not, lying or anything or exaggerating, but they're going to put the best possible spin to help their organization. And my job as a legislator is to figure out where the facts and the information stops and the spin begins, and then take that for what it's worth. So they're all they do a great job. And again, this place couldn't run without the information from lobbyists. I just came from Transportation Committee. I'm a city guy. I've been on farms, but I'm a farm guy. And I just ran a bill concerning milk transport on 90,000 axle weight limits. And I would have had no clue what I was talking about, except that the lobbyists for the dairy industry, as well as my staffer for transportation, I actually sounded moderately intelligent for a city guy talking about milk transport in the state of Iowa. That's what they do. So that is a great question. Staffers are essential. Lobbyists are essential to getting the process done. And legislators take that information and hopefully make a good decision.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else? Oh, well, I got to go anyway. I've got one more committee meeting. It's 1 o'clock. So I've got to go to natural resources and discuss crossbow hunting of deer. So it will be a great day for Iowa. We're going to make Iowa better in natural resources today, I think. So listen, I appreciate it. Please stay involved. I appreciate Kate and Matt for all they do here. And thanks for the opportunity to chat, and enjoy the weekend.
Thank you, Representative Siegrist. We really appreciate your time today and your vote this last week on House File 500, our interstate licensure compact. So thanks again.
I was on that subcommittee.
Yes.
And Matt and Kate wouldn't leave me alone. So
right. Good work. So
all right, thank you.
Have a great afternoon.
You bet. Thanks.
Well, thank you everyone for joining the ISHA 2021 Advocacy Day. We hope you had a great experience today and learned a lot about our legislative process. And just a reminder that we will be sending out CE certificates of attendance for those who requested them. And if you have any questions, please feel free to follow up with us at ISHA at isha.org. We appreciate your time and hope everyone has a great rest of their week.